Welcome back to the podcast. It's great to have you once again. I appreciate your time. I do repeat that often, as I've said before. The thing is I mean it. I am grateful and I am thankful that you actually take your time to listen to me. I appreciate it. I'm always baffled by those who don't show enough appreciation. Uh, it it always it always strikes me that there are those who take their time to listen to this, and it's humbling. It's yeah, lack of words on that one, but I am grateful. I am thankful. Last podcast we talked a little bit about Goliath and the Philistines, and Goliath and his brother and the Philistines. This is going to be a common theme in the next few podcasts, and I think it will be interesting. I spent that's going to be precocious. I was going to say I spent a lot of time on this. Well, I spent some time on this, and was going down one path, and I just went. I just so much information you absorb, and I was able to do it in the short time that I have because. You know how I feel about people who, you know what, I'm not gonna go down that road. I'm gonna try not to go down that road, even though I am going down that road. Too many men believe that they have to have no jobs to be able to do studying and show thyself approved and bring information of the Bible to people, and that is a shame. But we're gonna continue where we left off, or I should say, from where we left off. So with the rise of and we're going to talk about Babylon throughout this and Philistines, and I don't want to ruin it for you. With the rise of monotheistic religions, particularly Judaism and later Christianity, the worship of Ashtaroth at that time had waned, and we were talking about that. She had then became more of a figure, a mythological figure. So with characters sometimes that would reinterpret themselves in different contexts and later traditions. So, that being said, let's just kind of bring it back a little bit there. The last episode, in the last podcast, when I did talk about Goliath and his brothers and our brother and the Philistines, I mentioned how, in reality, the Philistines go back to Babylon, the Sumerians, but how in the world did they get here? When did they get here? Now, full disclaimer, I am not a professional scholar, but I did once stay at Holiday Express. Okay, that was a joke. I don't know if you remember that commercial or not. But where did the Babylonians go after the dynasty ended? After the fall of the Babylonian dynasty, particularly following the conquest of Babylon by the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC, the fate of the Babylonians and their culture involved several different developments. One may even say several significant developments. Number one being the integration into the Persian Empire. Babylon became a key province within the Persian Empire. The Persians, under Cyrus the Great, respected Babylonian culture and religion, allowing many Babylonians to maintain their traditions and practices, which is important because it would continue forth. It would continue from there all the way to Rome. The city itself remained a rather important administrative state, so to speak, and a cultural center within that empire at that time. Many Babylonians continued to live in their homeland, and Babylonian culture, language, Akkadian, and religion persisted even under Persian rule. The city's temples and institutions remained active. And Babylon continued to be a center for learning and philosophy and philosophers and so forth. We then look at the Hellenistic period. I'm not going to go through the whole Hellenistic period, but a brief summary, so to speak. After the conquest of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, Babylon came under Hellenistic influence. The city then saw a blend of Greek and Babylonian cultures, much like much like when the Roman Empire side shifted to Roman religion, which became Roman Catholicism, though it did eventually decline in importance. Well, the Babylonian culture, that is. Well, kind of. We'll get back to that and how that continued in its strain through time. Many Babylonians may have adapted to Hellenistic culture, lending to lending, what's the word? Leading to further changes in social and religious practices, blending old false religion with new false religion, although ultimately still controlled by Satan. Over the centuries, Babylon's prominence would appear to be diminished, especially with the rise of nearby cities like Seleucia and Ctesiphon during the Parthian and Sasanian periods, which, side note, the dominant language was both Greek and Aramaic. By the time of the Islamic conquest in the 7th century, Babylon had largely been abandoned at that point, and its inhabitants had somewhat dispersed. Now, we can look at the legacy of Babylon, although we'll continue to look at the legacy of Babylon because it does stretch quite a while. But the legacy of Babylon at that current point and the next century or so, although the political power of Babylon waned over time, the legacy of Babylonian culture still persisted in certain areas, influencing later civilizations in the region, including the Greeks, Romans, and even Islamic cultures. So you got mythology, Roman Catholicism, and jihad. So after the Babylonian dynasty ended, there were Babylonians that remained in the region, integrating themselves into successive empires while their cultural, religious, and intellectual contributions continued to shape the history of the Near East. Now, did some Babylonians end up in Greece? It's a very pressing question. Yes, some Babylonians did end up in Greece, particularly during and after the conquest of Alexander the Great in the 4th century. Some key points regarding the movement of Babylon to Greece would be 1. Hellenistic influence. After Alexander's conquest of Persia, Babylon became part of the Hellenistic world. The integration of Babylonian culture with Greek culture led to the movement of people between these regions, including scholars and merchants and so on. 2. Babylonians, particularly scholars and astronomers, contributed to the intellectual life of Greece. 1 Corinthians chapter 1:22, for the Jews require a sign and the Greeks seek after wisdom. Their knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, and astrology influenced Greek. Or I should say influenced the Greek thinkers, such as those in the Alexandrian school. Yes, the Alexandrian school was indeed founded by Alexander the Great. Many, if you study, some would know a cursory understanding of the Alexandrian library that got buried and blah, 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 and so forth and so on. I don't mean that's unimportant, but that's not what I'm talking about this evening. I'm not doing a deep dive on that. But the trade routes actually connected Babylon and the Greek world. And that's what we have to understand. That Babylonians were connected to the Greek world. They were together. They were able to move that way. It led to the ability to increase interaction. So some Babylonians did travel to Greece for trade and or diplomatic purposes. Some historical records and accounts mention Babylonian folks in Greek context, although some specific details about their lives can be a little scarce. but the blending of cultures and religion during the Hellenistic period facilitated these movements then and even today. The impact of Babylonian thought on Greek philosophy and science. Colossians chapter 2 verse 8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. And still be seen in various fields, reflecting the cross-cultural exchanges that occurred during this period. While the number of Babylonians who migrated to Greece may not have been large, there's no evidence that there was a mass migration, it was still significant and impactful. The interactions between Babylonian and Greek cultures were significant. Look at where we are today, leading to a lasting legacy in various fields. Let's jump to somewhere you may not be expecting. Where did the Sea People come from? Some might know this information, some may not. Some have their own views. I don't know, but this is what I'm going to tell you. The Sea Peoples were a confederation of naval raiders. Some might even call them pirates, but they were naval raiders who emerged in the eastern Mediterranean around the 13th and 12th century BC. Their origins are, yes, somewhat debated. There are different theories and even evidence that point to their possible homelands and movements that ultimately come from Babylon. Their origins. What about their origins in the Aegean and Anatolia? Even many of the scholarly groups agree that the Sea Peoples may have originated from the Aegean Sea, or region, which includes the areas of modern-day Greece and the islands surrounding thereof. This has been supported by archaeological. Yeah, I can say a word, can I? It was actually supported by archaeological findings and inscriptions, particularly those from Egyptian sources. Interesting. Egypt always plays a role, does it not? I'm not saying it's always a good one. I'm just saying it pops up a lot, doesn't it? Some theories have connected or have connections to the Mycenaean civilization, which was experiencing decline roughly around the same time as the rise of the Sea Peoples. Let's take a brief look at Western Anatolia. I know, by the way, that we can go deeper into this. I just wanted to give you a surface understanding. A lot of this, you can do deep studies. You can do deep studies on your own, and you can connect it to the Bible. You go into your Bible and connect a few of these things. And I just wanted to give you a kind of a framework, for lack of better phrasing. Another location that certain groups came from was the western coast of Anatolia, which is modern Turkey. Turkey is interesting because we can start talking about the churches that are mentioned in that area. But this region had been influenced by both Aegean and Near Eastern cultures, which could have contributed to the formation of the Sea Peoples, which all evidence suggests so. Other historical evidence suggests that a combination of factors, including famine and societal upheaval, may have prompted migrations from various regions, leading to the formation of these groups as they sought new territories. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take a sip of my water because, if you ever listen to me, it's a professional show. I always have a sip of water. What about ethnic diversity? I love ethnic diversity, don't you? Diversity is the greatest thing ever, isn't it? Okay. Sarcasm a little bit, I apologize. The Sea Peoples were likely not a single unified group, but it was rather a collection of various tribes and peoples with a mutual goal. I don't have to tell you yet what that mutual goal is. Anyone who worships God. Egyptian records name several specific groups, but such as the Sherdin, the Shekelesh, and Peliset, suggesting a diverse background, but not really, because they're influenced, or were influenced by the beginnings of Babylon. We keep going there. We keep on having the roots in that time frame. The Sea Peoples were noted for their invasions and raids against established powers like Egypt and the Hittite Empire. Their impact contributed to the collapse of multiple kingdoms. So, the origins of the Sea Peoples are a bit complex and involve a mix of migration from the Aegean and Anatolian, and Anatolia and Babylon, and possibly driven by socioeconomic factors and contributing to their role as a force in the ancient Mediterranean world for a while. I mentioned the Hittite Empire, so let's talk briefly about the Hittite Empire. They existed roughly around the 17th century, 16th century, 17th century, until its collapse around the 11th century. The Hittites emerged as a significant power in Anatolia around the establishing of the Old Kingdom phase. Somewhere around the 14th century, particularly under rulers like, never could pronounce this word, Suppiluliuma. I wrote it down, the first. The Hittite Empire expanded significantly, encompassing parts of Anatolia, northern Syria, and reaching into the Levant. The empire was at its height around 14 to 1200 BC, characterized by military conquest and extensive diplomatic relations with neighboring powers. We are still doing that today. They always think we're going to stop these things. Oh, we're going to have a military that comes in and changes all these things. It's always some sort of force, military force. But the empire began to decline in the late 12th century, facing internal strife and economic challenges, and even external pressures, including invasions by the Sea Peoples and even other groups as well. The Hittite capital, Hattusa, fell around 1200, marking the end of the Hittite Empire as a major political entity. What about the aftermath of that? Well, while the central authority of the Hittite Empire collapsed, some remnants continued to exist in the form of a Neo-Hittite city-state in the region for several centuries after the empire's fall. We're not going to get into that this evening. That can be another episode if I'm led to do so, if I feel, I don't know. But anyway, all right, let's jump into Ekron. Ekron. And pagans. Ekron and pagans. Now, I promised a little bit more about the Philistines. The Philistines or the Philistines. Ekron was one of the 5 principal cities of the Philistines and is frequently mentioned in the Bible. Look it up. Shouldn't be too hard to find, particularly in relation to its pagan practices and worship. The Philistines. Palestinians. Well, the Philistines would be proud of the Palestinians. There was the worship Beelzebub. I think now they say Beelzebub. I think that's the new word that they're using nowadays. Ekron is notably associated with the worship of Beelzebub, which was a significant deity in the region. This worship is actually mentioned in 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, where King Ahaziah of Israel seeks counsel from the god of Ekron after injuring himself, leading to a prophetic condemnation. What about the conflict with Israel? Like other Philistine cities, Ekron often found itself in conflict with the Israelites. Shocker. It was involved in military engagements during the periods of the judges and the monarchy. The city was strategically important due to its actual location and resources. The Philistines, including those from Ekron, had a notable influence on the surrounding culture, including some Israelites. Their practices and their military strategies often intermingled, despite all the underlying tensions. There were those who crossed back and forth. You have that today when they cross over the border to work and so forth, but that's a different conversation. Prophets such as Amos and Jeremiah addressed the inhabitants of Ekron, condemning their idolatry and predicting judgment. For example, in Amos chapter 1, verse 8, Ekron is included in a list of cities that would face divine retribution for their sins. Archaeological excavations in that region, or the region around or thereof of Ekron, have revealed temples and artifacts related to its pagan worship, providing insight into the religious practice of the Philistines. Boy, it's amazing to me sometimes how archaeologists seem to keep on just making the Bible true, and even secular ones. They don't even have to be Christian. They just keep on bringing up what the Bible's already said. I don't know how you can deny it. Ekron would probably, or should we consider, or be considered to be a representative of the broader Philistine culture characterized by polytheism and conflict with the Israelites. It's rather significant in biblical narratives, emphasizing themes of idolatry, cultural exchange, and divine judgment. Let's look at the city of Gaza. I'm sorry, I know it's called Gaza. Gaza was one of the other five principal cities of the Philistines, or the Philistines, and played a significant role in biblical history, particularly as a center of pagan worship. Gaza was known for the worship of various deities, including Dagon and Ashtaroth, similar to the other Philistine cities. The city's religious practices were characterized by polytheism, which stood in contrast to the monotheistic beliefs of the Israelites. Its strategic importance was the fact that it was located on the Mediterranean coast. I wonder if there were any sea raiders or sea people that came from there. Just thinking out loud. Gaza was a vital trade center. It was huge. And it was a very important military stronghold. Its strategic position made it significant in both commerce and conflict, particularly in its interactions with Israel. Throughout the biblical narrative, Gaza is depicted as an adversary of the Israelites. Notable stories included the account of Samson, who famously carried away the gates of Gaza in Judges chapter 16, and later met his demise there, showcasing the city's role in the ongoing struggle between the Israelites and the Philistines. The prophets often spoke against Gaza for its idolatry and immorality. For example, in Amos chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, Gaza is condemned for its violence and inhumanity, highlighting the moral failings attributed to its pagan practices. Despite its conflicts with Israel, Gaza, like other Philistine cities, influenced and interacted with surrounding cultures, contributing to cultural and religious exchanges. Just taking a sip of water. So Gaza exemplifies the complexities of the ancient Near East, characterized by the conflict, trade, and religious diversity in that area, which was anti-God. It was pro-God's, but anti-God. Its history as a center of pagan worship underscores the tensions between the Israelites and the Philistines, reflecting broader themes of idolatry and divine judgment. If you have more questions about this, you can dive deeper into this. Just open the Bible, go to those verses, and they'll direct you in all different places that'll relate this. I mentioned the Palestinians. The region known as Palestine has a rich and complex history, or so they say. It doesn't. I mean, again, you can say that it does because it has diverse mixed religions that integrate themselves in all the different gods, but they're the same different gods in different forms as the Babylons had worshipped it. We continue to go back that way. Palestine and paganism has just been going on forever. You look at the Canaanite religion. Before the establishment of the Israelite dominance, the area was inhabited by various Canaanite tribes who practiced polytheism. They worshipped a pantheon or pantheon of gods. Look that word up because it's very important. Pantheon of gods and goddesses, including Baal, Asherah, and Moloch, or Molech. These deities were often associated with fertility, agriculture, warfare. The Philistines who settled along the coastal areas of Palestine practiced their own form of polytheism. I wonder how they got there, by the way. Worshipping gods like Dagon and Ashtaroth. The conflict between the Israelites and the Philistines frequently highlighted the cultural and religious tensions in the region. I'm glad that doesn't still happen today. Oh, wait, it does. It's not going to stop either. We have to. Some folks have to stop pretending like that can be ever solved by man. When we look at idolatry and conflict throughout the biblical narrative, the Israelites are depicted as struggling against pagan practices, idolatry. Much like today, we have pagans everywhere. We have just pagans everywhere, and the idolatry is all around us, and we have to walk in the middle of this and navigate through this. And even if you have children, to navigate those children through that. Unless you sit at home and do nothing, and you hide up in the mountains, or you hide down at the beach, or if you hide down, or hide, let's see, where else go? Out in the valley, the desert. If you're not in the world and working and out there and having to deal with day-to-day issues, then yes, you will not understand any of this. You can read it, but reading something is different than living through something. But prophets like Jeremiah and Amos condemned the worship of foreign gods, emphasizing the moral and spiritual failures associated with such practices. Various pagan rituals, including sacrifices, temple worship, and fertility rites, are often in stark contrast to the worship of God practiced by the Israelites. The Israelites were often warned against adopting these practices. Some unfortunately did, which led to significant conflicts. Look at the Roman period when there was the Hellenistic influence. During the Hellenistic period, Greek culture and religion was pervasive and throughout the region. Pagan temples dedicated to Greek gods became prevalent, further complicating the religious landscape as it was. Under Roman rule, the region saw the continuation of pagan worship that came from Babylon alongside the emerging Christianity. Temples dedicated to Roman deities were built everywhere, and traditional pagan practice persisted among various groups. I would have to say that today, the historical view, the legacy of paganism in Palestine, contributes to understanding the region's cultural and religious diversity when that religion is just many gods, not the one true God. Archaeological findings, they're still finding, continue to shed light on ancient practices and revealing these various pagan beliefs that shaped the hatred in that area of God, which we see around here now. The history of Palestine is marked by a blend of various religious practices, which obviously include paganism. I think I'm going to end it on that note. I'm looking at the time. So I think the next episode we talk about, I think we're going to talk about the birth of the Philistines or the Philistines. Okay, I won't do that anymore. All right. I appreciate your time as always. I really do. I'm just incredibly thankful. Uh, you know, I'll end with this. I realize with everything in the world going on, we were around some bad weather, obviously down here. The Hurricane Helene was going to be coming right through my area. We were just right in the middle of it. It was coming up our way, and it literally just veered slightly right of us and missed us. We got hammered with a lot of rain, but it was not like it was up the northern part of Tennessee, because we live on the eastern side of Tennessee, southeastern side of Tennessee. We're an hour away from the Georgia border, but yeah, just kind of missed us and went up to North Carolina, and it's hard to be thankful. I am thankful, but it's hard sometimes because you realize how many people lost their lives, and you have to say, "Hey, it could have been you." And so I'm grateful to be here. I'm thankful to be here. So I appreciate that. All right. Well, that being said, God bless and have a beautiful evening. Good night.